We opened the playground, but I saw a bunch of kids playing on the playground.
Vinny, I put you in the middle so you guys could be spaced out.
Where's the middle?
One over.
You told me I was too close.
He's already spaced out, obviously.
Honestly, I looked and I was like, oh yeah, there's only one chair between, so it's the same. Sorry, I had a long.
I'm just joking. Obviously.
Larry, you and I are doing them a favor by not being there.
Okay, I'm gonna start recording.
Dispensary open somewhere.
And Mayor, you can start.
Welcome to the September 21st, 2021 public workshop, work session to address certain issues that have been highlighted in our agenda. The agenda is been published and posted on the website, and it gives directions on how to view the meeting by the public. Is there a motion to open this workshop? Trustee DeRozzi, second. Trustee Patino, all in favor? The meeting is open. Just for the record, Trustee Sullivan and Trustee Nell are excused for tonight's meeting, and there are therefore 5 of us present tonight. So, Richard, will you want to take us through the first agenda item?
Okay, thank you. So Mayor and
I'm sorry, if I could interrupt, I just would say, if there's anybody on who was coming on to hear about the energy audit, that needed to be postponed because the presenter was unavailable. So if that's your only reason to be in this meeting, if you've dialed in for that, it will take place in another public hearing at some point soon.
Thank you, Larry.
okay, thank you for that. We hope that they'll be able to appear next week. So I'll keep you posted, and we'll keep the public posted as well. So we have a couple of items on the public portion of the meeting tonight, and then we want to have an executive session to deal with personnel, to deal with particular persons, and then also want to bring you all up to date in terms of the negotiations for the collective bargaining, the settlement of the contract with the police, the PBA. So the first item on the agenda this evening is a discussion of a potential 10-year capital plan for the village of Dobbs Ferry. We had a discussion a while back, and you all indicated, rightfully so, that you'd like to try to see more of a comprehensive view of the village's needs, and we try to span them over a number of years. So you have an opportunity to see how they can fit in with the budget and the available resources. It's not the intention of this potential capital plan to be a final document, but rather one that's open for discussion. And, you know, this is your opportunity over time to have some input on it. Coming here to the village of Dobbs Ferry, I saw there were a number of capital needs that need to be identified. And so we tried to prioritize them so you could get some type of a working fiscal plan. All the department heads that had capital needs had an opportunity to participate in this program. And I thank Jeff for his help on this as well. And Elisa and Jen were very helpful in helping us format what you're looking at today. So I just like to run through them. I know it's pretty lengthy, but I think it's worth discussing them. And it's not intended that, you know, that you're going to say yes, no, or indifferent to any particular item. But just to run through the things that we're going through our head, so we'll take the current year, the 2021-22, and we have a bunch of proposed projects, many of which were already in your budget. So we have those projects, we have projected costs. And then in the third column, we have your current bonded indebtedness, which at the beginning of this fiscal year stood at 13 million and change. And you're going to make a payment of almost $2 million. So at the end of the year, your bonded indebtedness is going to go down significantly. So ironically, you have a lot of capital needs that you could meet in the first couple of years. And that's when your bonded indebtedness is going down. So it's kind of an opportunity time between that and the low interest rates to see the things that the village really needs within its budget. So just to run down, we divided everything into classes. The first one, the general Honeywell Energy Performance Contract was what the presentation was going to be tonight. They'll be coming in next week. And then that has a total capital cost of 2.8 million. That will be handled with contract financing if you decide to go with that. So it will not affect your bond rating. You will have to bond against it. So it doesn't affect your bonded indebtedness. And when Honeywell comes in, they're going to come in with a bunch of projects you can pick and choose, and you may choose to do some and not. The total potential cost, if you did everything, is 2.8 million. And the idea of the Honeywell projects is that they're supposed to offset each other in a sense based on the savings in the energy costs.
So just briefly, in the $2.8 million number, that's mostly, this is sort of mechanical systems and building improvements. It doesn't necessarily include renovations to the lobby, for example, something Trustee Durazi and I were looking at the other day and wondering, we could, make our hall more pleasant experience for people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff in here. So, we put a lot of stuff in there and you're going to eventually reprioritize them. So, your point is well taken. These are Honeywell's just energy, and you've already done a bunch of work here, actually. So a lot of it is tightening up buildings, replacing windows are not as good of a payback. You've already switched a lot from, oil to gas. You may want to investigate some more green energy potentials. But Terry will be here next week and you can discuss that with him.
Can I just ask, when you say, Jeff, you can answer, and I know it's probably,
I'm sorry?
can I just ask this, and maybe Jeff can answer this? So where it says capital funds already allocated, so that money is already in the budget, and is the same true for the 2021, this is general fund, is that also in the budget?
He stepped away.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering is there an alignment here where it says capital funds, is that referring to professional study for Village Hall pedestrian bridge? That's just the one, right? That we're not
He's got some money set aside in the capital plan.
for that particular project, but not for the previous one, which is the study for High Street Bridge.
No, there's no money for that.
So we can just assume an alignment means it's referring to that particular point.
Right, okay. Yeah, there was money set aside a couple of years ago for the bridge, but then the work did not proceed. The issue with the bridge, in addition to others, is that it's immediately adjacent to the aqueduct. So the state of New York gets involved. It's a little convoluted.
Yeah. Do we ever find out about the survey?
I mean, I have to speak to the gentleman, but I haven't gone to yet.
Okay.
And the MTA doesn't have any involvement.
They do. Our responsibility is the flat section of the roadway. The MTA is responsible for the abutments.
Okay.
So there's deterioration of the abutments there on the bottom, if you look at them. So that would be a question to bring the MTA and make sure they do
great.
that part. But anyway, yeah, so High Street Bridge is one of the ones that was highlighted by the state. So the first step would be to do a study on that. These are estimates from your engineer. And the same for the pedestrian bridge. On the DPW, the replacing of the culvert on Seneca Street is the issue that recently occurred. And that needs to be done fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So that's why we put it, this was actually amended over the last couple of weeks. Then the replacement of the sewer truck. Road resurfacing is an annual event. And this year we put in 100,000, they had asked for 200, we put in 100. So that's the 100 that's already in the budget. And then the whole situation with hill there.
Pietro.
Yeah, no, above Pietro. the hill coming
Maple.
down.
Beacon Hill.
Maple.
Beacon?
Yeah, Beacon Hill coming down into Gould Park. Really need to, I got quotes from the engineer to do both a study and the particulars to prepare the design. And that's what those two numbers are.
Richard, do we have enough time? I know that Seneca and Beacon may be pressing problems as is Pietro Place and Gould Park. Do we have time to get them into the Westchester County grant thing in January, or are these more immediate than that?
You know what, just to prepare plans for something like that is probably going to take a couple of months. So,
Well, they give money for plans too, I believe.
sorry?
I think they allocate funds for plans as well.
No, but I'm saying the plans have to be prepared. It takes time.
Right,
We're already into September.
Right,
So
okay,
to get it done by the end of the year would probably be a good goal.
yeah.
So, but that's, I mean, the plans and that type of analysis is the first step on any of these projects. The next one is the police they need an upgrade to their police communication system. And there are possible ARPA funds on that. The chief is investigating that. Same thing for the in-house records management. That is out of date. And the chief is investigating a shared program with the county of Westchester. So that 250 is like an outside number. It could be less than that if the county moves ahead with its program. Then we have replacement of 2 vehicles. And we have, each year we have $6,800 put in to start to replace the in-dash cameras for the police cars. So each year I think we put in 2. And the same for the tasers, to replace them with 2 a year. The fire department, they have a truck, 1999 Seagrave. Honestly, 20 years is about the useful life for a piece of fire apparatus. So then we have for the library, study to replace the HVAC and also the actual work itself. We put a grant and application for that, so we may get some of that money back. So in the worst case scenario on this particular year, you're looking at expenditures of over $5 million, but of that 5 million, 2.8, so over half of it is Honeywell. So you may or may not decide to do some of that. And at the same time, you're reducing of the 5.1, 2.5 million would be additional debt service, and you're reducing your debt service by 1.9 million. So it's an opportune time to do some of that work. And some of it is really, it's time to do it. The drainage things are a major problem, you know. So if I can pass to the next year. So for the following year, 22-23, which begins the middle of next year, we put in replacing the pedestrian bridge. And you see there's a note there that capital funds have already been put aside. So Jeff has those in a separate capital fund because that project was discussed several years ago. Replacing the ambulance is another need. The two ambulances there are quite old and they're having problems with at least one of them. And it's a possible ARPA funds on those as well. The DPW Gould Park to Pietro drainage project. We don't know what that's going to cost, but we put in $1 million. And again, there's possible ARPA funds there as well. DPW have a replacement of a sweeper truck. That sweeper is quite old, and I think we just had problems with it, right? It was out for a protracted period of time.
Yes.
And replacing one garbage truck. Roads resurfacing is an annual expense, and then it's replacing one dump truck. On the police, part of the program of the police study that was done last year recommends the implementation of body-worn cameras. This is for the protection of the public and for the force itself. So there are possible ARPA funds on those as well. We're investigating that. And then we have replacement of one vehicle for the police and then the 2 cameras and the 2 tasers. Recreation, we put in, really you should, it's time to look at Gould Park in a comprehensive way. Kendra has some plans for the existing building there and or demolish that and put up another building for a teen center or for administrative offices. And so if you decide to go that way, there's an actual funding later, but the first step would be to move ahead with the study. The Gould Park drainage and staircase, that's a CDBG application. If you don't get that, I would recommend going ahead with that work anyway in some fashion, even if the project is amended. Some work should be done there to avoid that kind of flooding catastrophe that you experienced before. The Gould Park snack and shade structure we had later in the program, but I met with Kendra yesterday and she felt that would be something she would like to move up because there's a lack of shade there and You know, I think the people are looking for that. The fire department, there's one vehicle, replacement of the chief's vehicle. And in the building department, replacement of one of their vehicles. And I put in here, it could be a possible electric vehicle because they're really used around the community. So the electric is sophisticated enough that it could be plugged in and used right here. Okay, so the next page, 23 and 24. So you'll see in the first couple of years, the funding is heavy, 5 million, 3 million. This third year is 4 million. And a big part of that, which is an unknown, is the High Street Bridge project. There's a possible grant funding from the federal government, and also some of that should be picked up by Metro North. Their responsibility is the abutment. The villages is the paved area or the road area, and the only complication there is that you're doing it right over the railroad track, so it makes it a little more expensive.
What does abutment mean in this
Like
case?
the things that hold up the bridge
So the piers, so the village is responsible for the steel structure
for the
and
for
the
the
road
bed,
surface,
for the road bed,
but the two piers are.
which is a good thing because there is some wear there. You gotta
Yeah,
get-
they have to, the concrete has to be removed and replaced.
And it's a big part of the project. So, you know, part of the thing is to get Metro North to do their part, you know, and you would have an engineer overseeing that project. So they should be interfacing with Metro North to make sure that they step up to the plate. So DPW, the Wall Grove paving and drainage project, I think that's been around for a while as well. And we got several priorities from the DPW, a lot of which patterned the recent water events that you experienced. Replacing a dump truck in the DPW, the roads resurfacing is an annual. And there's two dump trucks there and one Ford Escape. Police is a replacement of a Ford Explorer. And then there's the same two tasers and dash cameras. In recreation, you have the Memorial Park spray pad, which is a CDBG application, and Gould Park basketball court is a CFA application. So you have both of those. Hopefully you'll get that. If for some reason you don't, I would look quite seriously at the rest of Gould Park and the drainage issues that you're studying in a comprehensive plan. And then the Gould Park bathhouse plan would be to create a plan for the expansion of the bathhouse, because apparently that's been holding back your attendance at the pool. The county will only certify so many attendees based on the square footage of the restroom and bathhouse facility. So if you upgrade that, you should be able to increase your capacity. At the library, there's a retrofit for the main entry doors. That's to electrify them so that people can get through with strollers and also with walkers and whatnot. And that's also, that's a potential grant that's been submitted already. So that some of that money may come back. And then in the building department, there's the replacement of one vehicle. So at the end of, you see at the end of the 23-24, you've reduced your debt payment by another 1.7 million. And the expenditure is 4 million for that year. But again, half of that is the bridge project. So and here's some of what Trustee Patino was talking about. So we find a lot of things that need to be addressed here in terms of village facilities and buildings. And so we put in the $7 million in this particular year for upgrade of the village hall. It would involve identifying an alternate fire department's location and hopefully combining the ambulance into that building and combining all those. And it would allow the police department to spread out downstairs in theory, and also you could reconfigure some of the offices up here. But that's a placeholder really. For the DPWs, the Priory Road drainage project, 350,000. And then there's a replacement of two other vehicles, a 1992 Salter. By that time will be 30 years old. And the annual $100,000 road for surfacing. In the police, there's one vehicle, two tasers. And in the recreation, that would be doing your bathhouse over. And it seems like a lot of money, but every time you get involved with a, restroom, it always seems to end up being $500,000. So, it's hard to estimate, but at the library, it's 100,000, 120,000 for upgrade their interior, and in the building department, it's replacing another vehicle. So that particularly reduced your debt service by 1.7 million. The total expenditure is about 9 million, but 7 of it is doing a building over. So if you didn't even do the building, you'd be incurring as much debt as you were eliminating. So that's pretty healthy. So for the year 25.
I'm sorry, Richard, for the prior year, that $7 million, does that include the construction of a new building for fire and ambulance in
Yes.
addition?
Yes.
So that's both the renovation of Village Hall and
Right.
a new structure.
Yep.
And is there discussion about where that would be located?
I'm sorry.
Where would that be located?
Yeah, the site would have to be identified. The thing is, with these modern fire trucks, you're supposed to have sufficient access so that, if your door is here, you're supposed to have enough room so the truck can be outside. So what you've got here is very old and it's not in keeping with modern standards. So you'd have to find a lot that was deep enough that you could pull your trucks out. And you would combine all the trucks into one building. And hopefully you could sell Ashford or hang on to it. They have a very nice museum upstairs. It'd be nice to incorporate that somehow and do something with the first floor. The museum's very impressive, so, but at least you could, you could sell the ambulance building. I mean, these are pretty far out, so these costs are not, set in stone, nor are they firm. They're just best estimates. I know that in Peekskill, they built a firehouse that was $16 million, but it's very big. You don't need that. And so we were ratcheting down from there.
Just 16.
16, yes. Okay, so 2025, the total projection is like $1 million, and that's what you're reducing your debt payment by. So the road surfacing, replacement of 1 car in the police department, 2 tasers, rehab the Memorial Park building, and then the upgrades. That would be among those items would be to add a restroom on the outside of that building, so that if you go ahead with the spray park, then there'll be accessible restrooms from the outside. You don't have to go into the building to get to them. You can do like a modular, something like that, to keep the costs down. And it's also to upgrade the baseball field stairs. There's a senior bus in there, and then there's painting in the library. So you see, the further you go along, the more of these projects you've accomplished, actually. So the next year, 26, total expenditure is 200,000, and your debt payment, your reduced debt payment is $1 million. So, and then you've got in the police, you've got the replacement of several vehicles and replacement of 2 tasers, and then flooring in the library. Also, in one of these vehicles, I think, is the park enforcement, so that could be, an electric vehicle as well.
I think the parking enforcement's the next one.
What's that?
I think the parking enforcement's the next one. So those
Okay.
are the,
All right, well, this may
Connects.
be another one. Okay, so for 2027, so, the big item here is, it's like Kendra's, long-term projection and aspiration to do a community center at Gould Park. It's $5 million, would include a gym, and they would move over the administration offices and much of the programming over there. So that's the big item there, really. It's the only major item.
And she wants $2 million for indoor pool.
No, right. I mean, I honestly, I admire her exuberance. It was on this list, but I moved over to the side. So that would be a challenge. So at any rate, but the big item there is if you want to go ahead and build something in Gould Park, that would be probably demolishing the building in the back and then rebuilding. I mean, we looked at that building. It's sort of interesting building. So you'd have to look at that and see if it was salvageable. Sometimes it's as expensive to renovate as it is to build new, so. And then the next page is 2028, just replace the Memorial Park playground. At this point, it's becoming like routine maintenance almost to redo those things. And then the 29 is a number of vehicles and very little expenditure. And then the last page is replace the Memorial Park basketball court. So that's it. So I guess you all can have a chance to look it over and think about it and whatever. We can talk about it another. If you have specific questions on departments or whatever, you could have department heads come in and talk to you as well on specifics. Or you know what, if you have questions that come up afterwards, feel free to send me an email or whatever.
But if we wanted to move forward, let's say on the Pietro drainage study, that would come out of where would that money come from?
So you either have to bond, it either comes from fund balance or you have to bond it. So the first step on that would be to go ahead and with the engineering studies, which is 110,000 and 100. And I'll bring back the specifics from the engineer the next meeting and start to look at it. That's the first step.
And that's a hard number from their proposal.
It's just an estimate.
An estimate,
I mean, I said, I'm not holding you to it, but can you give me a number so I can throw a number in to talk to you? It's hard to know until you really get into it, as you know.
Yeah, I'd just like to see what the study entails for
Right.
$110,000. I mean, I think this, and to those of you who've been on the board for some time, forgive me for this question, but let's take, for example, $2.8 million for the Honeywell energy performance. Let's say we looked at that closely. We found that all of the projects being proposed really made a lot of sense in terms of, sort of long-term savings for energy usage and just improvements on the building. You can see a lot of things that need work here. How does that project get funded? Sort of the big numbers, like the 2.8 for this, the $2 million for the bridge, the $7 million. Like, how do big projects like that
So
really
the
happen?
2.8 million is an energy service provider. So the state provides, you can go for an RFP. So Honeywell's going to come in, they're going to present you, you've seen the plan, and that's a preliminary plan. So you're going to go for an RFP for an energy service provider. It's going to go out there to see who responds. Honeywell will be one of them. You'll decide on one of them. Not all of them offer financing and whatnot. Honeywell does. So if you decide to go for 2.8 million, or you decide to go for 1 million or whatever, some of it is going to, some of the expense is going to be countered by the savings, and what's not is going to be, they provide their own financing. So that is going to sort of take care of itself. The other items are going to have to be either funded from.
Can I pick that apart just a tiny
What's
bit? Let me pick this apart a little bit. So it is both designed, constructed, and financed by the same umbrella company. And that's the case with, let's say we get 4 responses back, Honeywell being one of them. Those are all those types of companies do that sort of thing. I mean, this is all new to me yet.
They don't all do financing. So I think I did a deal with NYSERDA or NIPA or whatever several years ago. And at that point, they weren't offering financing. So they basically, when they would do it, you would pay for it from the savings. But in that case, there was a lot of oil to gas conversion. So it was an easy savings. So there was no net payment at the end of the day. Same as when you did your LEDs, you had a net savings and the project was paid for from the savings. But they don't all offer financing. So you'll have an opportunity to review a number of respondents, and then you decide which one you want to go for. I know Honeywell does the financing because I've dealt with them before. But anyone who's qualified as a energy service provider by the state can respond, and then you decide which one you want to go with. Then they will.
But if Honeywell, I'm sorry, if Honeywell is providing financing, that financing would go onto the village balance sheet as debt, correct? I mean, it would still be debt that's owned by the village.
Correct.
Right, but you don't have to go to the public market. You don't have to go through the whole auditing procedure in order to sell bonds. It's a significant, I mean, I don't know what the bottom line interest rate is, but there's a significant savings in not having to go public with it. So,
Right.
um,
And there are grants available for certain energy savings type products, grants and other incentives, which would have the potential to lower the cost. Does Honeywell help us figure those out? Is that something we need to do ourselves? Is that something we should encourage the sustainability task force to look at and pursue, or all of the above?
yeah, I mean, I think they're open to helping, of course. But they'll be here next week, and these questions are probably best put to them. Any resource that's available, we want to be able to take advantage of. The thing is, normally you were doing it from savings. So like if you spend X amount on LED lighting, you know you're going to save on your electric bill. So the net cost to the village is zero. The same when you do a conversion from oil to gas, the saving used to be significant, so it would pay for itself. When you get into other things that are more difficult, like the useful life on windows and the cost, it just doesn't pay for itself. So that's out of pocket. It's those things that they'll help you finance with. But I anticipate that Honeywell will be here next week, and then you can certainly ask them all that stuff.
Thank you.
And along the lines that I guess Mike was asking, the rest of the stuff, if we decide to go through, there's a certain number when we decide we have to bond it, right? I mean, and what number would that necessarily be? Would it be like $500,000? You know what I'm saying, Jeff?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So over the time that I've been here, about the last 6 years, we've generally topped our debt out around $21 million. So we're going to be sitting at 11,315,000 at the end of this year. So there's some room there to do some bonding. And, you know, the rates right now are extremely attractive.
So if we were to say, yes, we think all these other items are important to do for this year, we could do a bond for that amount and then just, okay, then make sure we're just watching it for the next year. We could do another bond for the next year, right?
So also, you know what, I don't want to preempt Jeff, but you know, through all of your good work, you ended the prior year with a little extra money, and he's going to come in and give you the report on that. We're not talking millions of dollars, but you know, several $1,000s or a couple of $100,000 or whatever, 200 or 300 maybe. And our recommendation is going to be that that money go into a capital fund so that it can be used for some of these projects, because we really have huge capital needs, and it'd be nice to start putting that money aside so that you have it, so it's less than you have to go to bond for, and you don't really have it to take out of fund balance. So Jeff, the order is almost finished, right?
Yeah, basically the field work is done, and they have no proposed entries at this point. So I have it's about $400,000 right now is surplus.
Which will help with some of these capital projects.
Right. And you know, a recommendation would be maybe to start some capital reserves, to start putting some money aside to fund some specific projects or, you know, vehicle purchases or whatnot.
Right, and we as a board then can look at this and also say, you know what, we think, and I'm just saying this without saying it's my meaning or anything, but we could say that the police body worn camera program should be done this year as opposed to the handheld radios, which we could do the following year. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we can talk about.
Absolutely.
And who also, I mean, it's possible ARPA funds. Does Fiona work with the chief on this? And do you have any idea of the mechanics of it?
Yeah, I mean, we've been all talking about it really internally and investigating it. It was a little clear. I don't know if they came through with any clear direction yet or no.
Research I've done, they're really kind of heavy on first responders and communications, you know, fire, ambulance, and police. So, you know, my take is that this is stuff that the ARPA funds could pay for. And we, at this point, have half of the funds in already. that was, the way it was set up was they dispersed that out and told you to come up with a plan.
Really?
Basically.
Well, it looks like there's, one from, ambulance, fire vehicles and police communication, which seem to sort of nest into that pretty well.
Right.
Those three things add up to a little bit more than what but I think those seem to sort of check the box.
Absolutely. And, some of the drainage, if some of these came in lower, lower than these estimates, it could be used for some drainage as well. And it doesn't have to be like sewage drainage. It can be like rain runoff, stormwater. Yeah.
Richard, you mentioned the upgrade to the PD radio communication system with the police department. I do recall about over a year ago when this came about, which is a county effort, which is significant to the communication with the police department because the whole system is changing and it's crucial. It's not really a choice. You said that there is an opportunity for a grant for that?
Yeah, I mean, the chief is investigating it as we speak. Yeah, he just feels very strongly that we have to go ahead, you have to go ahead with it. But he's looking at ARPA funds too.
Yeah, this came into the agenda, like the chief spoke to us about this, like, I don't know if you remember being a while ago. I remember.
You mentioned it, yeah. And the county share program, if the county puts a program together, it could be a lot more, it could be a lot less than that, I just try to give you real numbers rather than tell you 250 and it ends up being 500.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the communication among the police officers is quite important. So.
I mean, one thing that it seems to occur to me going through this, that there are at least sort of three categories of things here. One category being essential, the High Street Bridge can't fall down, the pedestrian bridge to Village Hall, some of these drainage projects, they just have to get done or we're going to have, significantly negative outcomes. Then there are improvements where, we're providing more amenities or upgrades. And then there are things that may be aspirational. And I think it behooves us to kind of parcel things out so that we know we're covering the things that are essential first.
Good point.
Yeah, we really just tried to give you everything, I agree with you. That's a good breakdown of what you're looking at. Honestly, except for the obvious exceptions, there's really not that much here that's aspirational. A lot of it is pretty necessary.
You did an outstanding job with breaking down all of these, and I for sure hope that, for the years to come, this will be a platform of direction for, any future mayors or future trustees. I do notice that there is items in some of the later dates that I personally have seen and heard about it from the moment that I was elected in 2017. So that's where it goes back to what the mayor was saying, that maybe we need to shift some of these things over. But we know that always something else is going to be added to this list that is going to pass in the next 10 years. So we need some kind of culturing or confer somewhere around, because something is going to break, something is going to go. And I mean, one of our previous meetings, we had to spend 40 grand with the fire department. So that's something that I think that you need to add like a reserve line every one of these years, because we know that something else is going to come up, unfortunately.
Right.
I think that's a good point, because I'm not sure if Pietro Place would have been on this so high up if this didn't happen recently, right? So
that was exactly what I was looking at.
Well, I think you did a great job, everybody, and it does have to be a living, breathing document where we do look at it every year. And like you said, future trustees, board, and the village staff can look at it and say, let's address it, modify it. So
we should frame that in the back.
I would also say spending some money either with Fiona or other resources to make sure that we're getting as much possible assistance, as the village deserves from county, state, and federal sources would also be very important. That should be a priority. Those offsets could be really critical in terms of helping us manage these costs.
the county has some major stormwater money funds available. And I think we're working on that. Mary Jane Shimsky is helping us with that as well. Are there any FEMA money available for this, Richard?
I'm not sure about that yet. I don't think FEMA has come out with guidelines yet, right, Jeff? They haven't come out with their final guidelines.
I don't think so yet, no.
I would think
But
that
certainly
is
whatever's
what it
available, we would want to look into, yes. And like I said, we have a questionnaire we're submitting to the county. Ed was able to find this map, so that helps a lot in terms of designating our flood areas, and we sent that over this afternoon to them. So we'll be talking to them again this week.
Okay, so we'll review this, and I think we should tentatively decide to address this stuff again, maybe in a month, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, to see where we are on this and what the updates are. So I think we got a chat from Patty.
Yep. He said, we need an updated hazard mitigating plan to be able to take the best advantage of FEMA funds.
We're coordinating with the county on the upgrading of the hazard mitigation plan.
Yes, Elisa just responded, that it is in process.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so let's bring this back after we had time to think about it. Someone wants to know if they can, my vision isn't that great, so tell us what
I
that
know.
says.
That's right.
I thought you were still talking. I didn't want to interrupt.
Notice it.
Can we bump up the Wall Grove project?
We can talk about it.
Significant flooding and home damage.
So we have that for 2023 and 2024. I mean, it is possible that we could decide, let's just bond it all next time and get rid of all these drainage issues. I mean, it is a possibility. We can discuss that, see how people feel about it.
There's no such thing.
But
It's getting rid of all the ecological problems. It's not a, it's not a possibility.
what, are you saying that we can't address these problems, or it's a temporary?
No, I'm saying that we can, keep sticking our finger in the holes in the dam, but I think it would be an illusion on our part to say that we're going to comprehensively solve them by bonding, the current known problems.
But given the costs
Two hurricanes in 2 weeks, one of which no one had ever heard of. I mean, that happens with more frequency, or there are other issues, then there's no way there's no real way to protect against those things.
Other than build walls around the Hudson River, right? I mean,
It comes with the territory where we are.
Well, one thing is, if we issue bonds, Jeff, you could probably comment on this. There are certain costs that are fixed, that are associated with it. So there's probably some efficiency in doing it of a size to tackle more rather than fewer projects, particularly if those projects are essential projects where flooding or other issues are causing damage.
Right, exactly. And, the larger the bond, the better rates and the more responses you're going to get. And each bond, like Larry said, does have fixed costs associated with it, attorney's fees, issuance fees, et cetera. So yes, you're right. It may make sense to, go bigger than to piece it out.
I mean, I defer to the finance professionals, but generally when you go for the bonding, you lump a bunch of things together and you get a pretty substantial number. So you go to the bond market once because the underwriting is pretty expensive. So generally you might go to the bond market, not every year, but maybe, every 2 or 3 years. So that you're going once to the well, and you try to cover a lot of things at once. So.
yeah, that's why I was thinking about putting all those projects together. So we can talk about that later on this year, but those are good points, and we can address how much of a bond and what the bond should issue. Any other questions or comments about the proposed projects? Okay, let's move on to the next item.
Okay, the next item is comprehensive financial goals and policy. I defer to Jeff. He'd been speaking to you all about this previously, and this is basically just rolling all the financial goals, policies into one document. So Jeff?
Yeah, that's, basically the long story short of it. All of this stuff is either formally adopted or it's the current procedures that are in place. So, let's see here. So if you look at the way this is set up, it's basically an introduction with some financial goals, number of policies, most of which are adopted already, and procedures for staff to follow. And looking at this is best practice recommendations for governmental financial management. And some of these policies are approved on an annual basis, like your investment policy and your procurement policy. But any and all of these could require updates in the future. Laws change, events affect the financial health of a village, et cetera. Now, I can sit here and go through a number of these or all these if you want. I'm not sure, exactly how much detail you want right now.
Well, could you just tell us, Jeff, what would be different than what we already, our plans are? For instance, you're saying on page 2, the village shall maintain an unreserved, undesignated fund balance, a level of no less than 10%, no greater than 15. That's currently what we do.
That is the current policy, correct?
And you have on C, the village will establish a contingency appropriation, the operating budgets of up to 4%.
Mhm.
So that's what we do currently.
Correct.
Right? So is there something that you recommend that we do that we don't already do? Because I think you're right, putting it all in one place, having a great financial goal and policy document is a great idea. And I don't know if anyone could be against that, but is there anything that you see that's different than what we're currently doing that we should bring to our attention?
No, like I said, I think most of this is in place already. There are some policies in here that I'm recommending, change order policy. Where's that?
You want to go to that?
Section 14 or page, section 14, page 24.
Page
24.
Let's see.
All right, my computer's being. Anyway, we can take a look at it.
Yeah, so currently, do we have a change order policy?
No, we don't.
So this is a
Nothing,
step in the right direction
Right.
to have one.
exactly.
And certainly it looks like it's a great idea.
Exactly. And it just outlines procedures that should be followed. And it's really from the direction of the board, who is the oversight of this sort of, these policies. So I don't know if you want to talk specifically about what's in the policy or.
Yeah, let's talk about it since, so currently we don't have a definitive change order. policy.
I don't find a change order policy ever being adopted by any board.
Right, so currently, and I don't know if Richard could comment on it or you, Jeff. So currently, it's done pretty much at I hate to use the word ad hoc basis. Things come in and someone makes that decision.
Correct.
It could
Correct.
be not necessarily you, but someone else could have approved that.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, you kind of get down to the end of the project and then the board kind of is surprised because, we asked for additional funding sources
Right.
to finish the project off. So,
Do you want Lisa to share her screen? She has your document.
oh, sure.
Were we emailed this in advance?
I emailed this out, Larry, back in May.
Okay.
I mean, we can send it again.
I can send, we can
Thing
send it
is,
to you.
For myself as an administrator or a manager, I just, took it upon myself that change orders over a certain amount of money I would bring to the board, because there's too many surprises when change orders are just made and nobody really knows what's going on. And then at the end, you come in with a lot of change orders, or I had one situation where the board thought that they had already approved the change and it had never been made. And so for me, if I'm administrating a program, I would probably come in with any change order over $10,000. I think, $20,000 is a lot of money for a change order, for a couple $100,000 projects.
Right, and this is this is just, recommendations that I put together, and we can change it to whatever you want. If you're not comfortable with 20, you want it to be 5,000, we can do whatever it is you want. Really, even if the initial approval is designated to somebody else, it should still come to the board for your notification, so you're aware of the change order that was approved.
And your bid spec should have instructions on change orders. A lot of times, conditions in the field will change the route of something or move something right or left, and it may mean ripping out something and putting something new in. And oftentimes that's in the past been accomplished by the engineer of record who's in the field and just says, yeah, go ahead. And so there's been a lot of delegation, which isn't always the best way to handle public works projects. And so this is a great suggestion to get you started to think about the chain of command and instructing that, and actually adding the change order policy line of command in your bidding spec across the board, no matter who's designing the bid spec. I almost think like you should have standard clause contracts. When I worked in many other municipalities, I worked on the boilerplate aspects of the bid spec to be sure it meets the needs of that municipality. In this case, the bid spec changes each time an engineer is brought on board. So you would benefit from having a tighter control over the expenditures that are done above and beyond what the estimated construction costs.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. So I think we should maybe move forward with this and put it on the agenda to address, but I just want to get the temperature of the rest of the board. So Maura, what do you think about it and the money amount?
I mean, I know that Richard mentioned 10,000, and then I think it depends on what it is exactly, and I really think that even an expense of 5,000 should be at least made aware, even if it's notification, and then $10,000 definitely requires an approval, and I will feel more comfortable if it is a specific person assigned, either if it's the village administrator or the treasurer, to approve it.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. 20 is kind of a high number. I mean, for smaller projects, if there's a couple $100,000 project, $20,000 change orders, 10%. The current process is, I'll use the Embassy Center because I know that's an example that's thinking about this. But in that case, change orders were approved in what amount or any amount by the architect engineer? Is that how that process?
Which one now? The Embassy Club?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was done by the engineer was the authority who was in charge of that project. But I just think it's good to have a record of all the change orders, because first of all, you know what's going on in a project, and then you're not caught at the end of the project short $100,000 or whatever. So I would probably get a resolution approving change order over a certain amount, because you approve a project for whatever, $3 million, you're entitled to know if there are change orders, unless it's an emergency change order in the field. And then that's understandable that they has to be made. Otherwise, they can still bring it back to you and say, this had to be done. Just want to give you a heads up.
Right.
You just maintain a lot more control over the project.
Yes, those are normally act of God situations. Those are never, that just cost more money. I think it's kind of strange to me to hear good practices that anything anything over $5,000, you have an owner approved just because it's a good way to maintain a good relationship.
And they don't have to be done like, they're not all done like, oh, we had this change, you're in the business. We had that changer yesterday. Sometimes they might come in with several of them because they might go into a project and realize that, X, Y, and Z were wrong. They can do them all at once. It doesn't have to be all these singular resolutions, but you just have a better handle on it. And then at the end of the project, why they did this and that. And, it's just a very good record for the project.
But is
Well-
$5,000 too much of a small amount for big projects like this? Like, I mean, when we talk about projects like this, it's like $5,000, it will be like kind of like insignificant. Would it be safer to say that approval 10,000 or more? Because
My
5,000.
only, I mean, I agree with that. I guess my worry is that, sometimes we don't meet that often. And time is money in construction. And so if you need to do something in order to move forward with the whole project, having to wait 2 weeks to get it on our agenda could be a problem. So I agree with you. I don't want to make the number too small. I also don't want us to be looking at every, added air conditioning grill. But Richard, if your recommendation is 10,000, I think that's a fair number.
It's not a bad place to start. You can always change it.
Right.
It gives you
Sorry.
modicum of control.
Larry, what do you think?
I think Michael is hitting on an important issue here, which is, if you tell a contractor, okay, we'll have a decision for you in 10 days or 14 days, when I could get this on the board agenda, that contractor is going to potentially pull resources and go someplace else. So it could take us forever to do a job. I do think if we're going to have a reporting process, it ought to be a combination of a report of all change orders. It could just be a summary thing that we don't even talk about, but something akin to the what we see in the ledger for expenditures. But that we also ought to see cumulative numbers, so that if a particular project, has a dozen change orders that are below the amount, that we're seeing that. And so somebody can put their hand up and say, now, wait a second, because, a year into the project, we might forget that we've already approved a certain number of change orders. So we should have both the cumulative number and whatever the ask is. I'm not sure I'm in a position to make a recommendation yet. I really feel like I should spend some time with this document. I know we're not voting on it here. But I'm not sure, maybe other people are more familiar with this whole document than I am, but I need to spend some time with it.
Donna, what do you think?
I completely agree with Larry. I would like to spend more time with this because I haven't had a chance to look at that much. 10,000 seems like a reasonable amount, but as I said, I'd like to look at it a little more. I do really like the idea, and I'm glad Larry brought it up because I was going to too, that we do get a running, even though we're not approving a certain amount, it would be good to see the running amounts as they go along. Because as he said, it'd be very easy for somebody to rack up, if we go to 10, 5,000 here, 5,000 there, and for us to at least know what's going on, even though we may not be approving those lower.
I think that should already happen. I can't imagine that we use anything other than standard agreements and AIA documents, and those require, monthly requisitions require a specific document.
Yeah, but the board doesn't.
702, and let me finish. That document shows both the contracted sum and the net change orders to date every month. In order to get paid, you have to show your client those documents, and that document summarizes it. So that's already in place. We're just not looking at it.
That's right. We're not seeing it.
Right, yeah.
One other thought in terms of the timeliness of it would be to specifically allow a majority of the board to approve by either email or by phone with the treasurer or village administrator.
Okay, those are all good points. I think we've all decided that this is an important procedure to put in place, but certainly everyone should take a look at it, feel comfortable with it. We also want trustees Nell and Sullivan to review it. But so I do think we should plan on putting it on the agenda, not in October, but maybe November. We can address this?
Sounds good.
Anything else that's different, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I can go through and highlight and let you know, like page 23, travel outside of the village and emergency meetings is something that's different. You know, it outlines food purchases and why you might have a food purchase. You know, for board or staff meetings and village events and whatnot. I can resend it out and highlight the stuff that is different.
Okay, if you could just highlight, yeah, the areas that we should be reviewing.
Mhm.
I do think I'd like to get this done before the end of the year.
I think that's great. I intend to read this as though it were a de novo document because I don't know, I'm not familiar enough with these financial policies that I am, you know, it's just good, I think, for all of us to read it from start to finish to make sure that just because we've been doing it that way, it may not be the right way to do it going forward.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the accessory dwelling units. Who's going to be speaking on that?
I'll speak to that. So I've been talking to Deputy Mayor quite a bit, and she's been very active in her committee in investigating the potential of accessory dwelling units. You have communities on either side of you that provide for that. Accessory dwelling unit would primarily be a unit that's smaller than the primary, and it would be theoretically located in a single family zone. Donna and I have been talking about it quite a bit, and I basically prepared a potential law just for discussion's sake. And I had input from your planner, and Lori Lee also gave me some suggestions. But before taking it to the next step, which is to actually bring in a local law, ask Lori Lee to finalize it, I wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that there's interest in pursuing an accessory dwelling unit local law. So,
Donna, do you want to speak a little bit about what these are?
Yeah, the accessory dwelling units, it's the purpose of these units is one, to help increase housing stock, but mostly it's to help people possibly stay in their homes, seniors or young families or whatever. It would be sort of, if you had a garage that had the space over it and you created that into a housing space, or a basement or some other part of a house. Some places allow you to build, other laws say, no, it has to be an existing structure. It has to be an existing structure for, say, 5 years. They can only be a certain percentage of the size of the house. They're usually 2 bedrooms or less. They require a special permit, and some laws allow for those permits to be renewed periodically over a certain amount of time. It also gives a way to make sure, we know that there's some of this going on in the village already, but we also, and we hate the idea of having to displace people who are paying affordable rents, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the standards for these sorts of units are safe and healthy for the people living there, and quite often they're not. So, there are various things that we would need to look at. It would be, do we require a parking space, or would we allow that to go for an affordable housing unit? Are we going to limit the amount that would be in the village? I believe Irvington and Hastings both say you can't have more than 50 at the same time, but neither one of those communities have even anywhere near that. So that's something that we could look at. But essentially, it is a way of allowing people to afford to stay in their homes, give people a little extra income, for seniors or whatever. So I also know that New York State is in the process of possibly, passing a law allowing for this as well. And it's usually in single family housing, single family zones.
And I think you also, you highlight something that I think is important. So it makes these units safe because they'll be legal. In other words, if someone's renting out their basement as an apartment that we don't know about, it's not up to code and things could happen. Whereas if we do this, people can theoretically make their basement fit one of this criteria, and then they can get approval that way.
Yeah, if they do to code, and if it meets the designation of an accessible dwelling unit, again, the size. Also, in accessible dwelling units, the primary owner must live on the property. So you can't take a single family house, put an accessory dwelling unit, and have 2 rental units. The owner must also live in the house. It is a way for owners to be able to stay in their homes. That's the idea of this.
Okay. So before we move,
There's some others. I mean, the big picture is that Dobbs Ferry in zoning districts allows for accessory buildings. You can have a garage, you can have a pool house, you can have a shed, you can have whatever. You're just not allowed to live in them.
Right.
So it means I can put a bathroom in my garage, but I can't put a kitchen, bedroom. And so we know that there's a number of people already doing this. They have garages, they rent it out.
Right.
They have basements where they have a separate door and they rent it out. So there's one part of that is, legalizing some of those things. I think there's another part of it aside from, allowing, let's say, retired couple whose children are gone, want to stay in the village. Our taxes get higher and higher each year. Well, not this year. But taxes have gone up significantly in the past couple of decades, and so those folks can stay in their home by renovating their garage and renting it out for a reason. But there's another element, and we talk about this all the time. Talk about diversity in Dobbs Ferry, and diversity, as we all know, is very often a question of economics. And so I believe that this, in addition to helping people who already live here continue to afford, I think it'll allow other people to come into the village who can't otherwise afford a single family home or, a relatively expensive apartment downtown. So there's that component also. I think there are a lot of questions how permissive or otherwise we want to be. And I think some of those have to do with only allowing existing structures or allowing people to build new ones. I would argue that it makes sense to allow people to build new ones as well, if your zoning allows. I think if your zoning allows you to put an accessory building onto your property and you want that accessory building to be a dwelling unit and not a garage or a shop or a pool house, then you should be able to do that. I think there are other issues around, Donna brought one up about, whether or not the owner has to live there or not. Those are items for discussion. I think in looking at this, I spoke to Blaine, who sent me some information, and he had a few kind of interesting questions to consider. And I don't know at what point we should go into those, but I think limiting the total number doesn't really make sense. There's not going to be that many, as evidence in the other villages who adopted them. Should it only be single family residences that can apply for those? Should there be, I think my tendency would be to lean towards more permissiveness, because I think it's going to add a lot of value in the sense of keeping residents and allowing new residents to come in. So I'd be in favor of opening this up a little more.
Laura?
Well, I have been very involved with Donna and the Affordable Committee in this, and I just want to really thank Donna and the rest of the committee, especially Tracy and Robert for the amazing work that they have done. I agree with everything that Michael said. I am a big advocate of the diversity in the village, and this will definitely make a humongous difference in opening the doors a little bit more for people that they cannot afford to pay what it costs to live in Dobbs Ferry today. In addition to that, the legalization of so many units that I'm sure they already exist, it creates a safe environment. The majority of the unfortunate death that occur in New York City as a result of Ida were in illegal basement apartments. So it will be something that it will be beneficial for the safety of the village. So I'm 100% in support of approving this.
Larry?
I'm supportive of accessory dwelling units. I probably would be a little bit more conservative than Michael in terms of, the where and how. I do think in terms of keeping the owner as maintaining their primary residence in the home as a condition is a very sensible restriction. In neighborhoods that are single family neighborhoods, you otherwise run the risk of essentially creating multifamily or multifamily-like dwellings in those neighborhoods and changing the neighborhoods in ways that are significantly different than allowing someone to have an accessory unit in their own home where they live. But I'm generally supportive, but with limits.
Okay, so it seems like the majority of the board is in favor of the concept.
Okay.
So the next step,
So we'll go ahead and work with council and we'll prepare a local law to bring to you. And it's intended to be a discussion point. So, if we draft it in a certain way or it comes forth that way, we're not advocating. We're just putting it forth so you can go through the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I mean, there will be optional aspects of this. The draft that was circulated to just ask for comments from the planner and me, and doing the research I did on the general code with other communities. It's drafted now in a very straightforward way, conservatively for single family. But I have to say also, there's one aspect of it that allows for some flexibility, and that's the traditional, like mother-in-law's apartment. So if an aging resident wants to stay in their home, but opts to move to that accessory dwelling unit, they can move their immediate family or their caretakers into the main part of the house. And the law that is circulating for comment, and we'll get to you, has that option. That means the senior doesn't have to keep up this huge home, but can move to the accessory dwelling unit and permit the main home to be occupied by family or friends or caregivers or something. So that's a tremendous plus also with keeping your aging residents here in the village. The seniors are a tremendous resource for your village and for your newcomers, and the historical knowledge is just very, very deep with that community. And this is an option that the accessory dwelling unit law will allow, that they can stay. They'll move into the accessory dwelling and then their family in the main house.
yeah, okay, so that's great. So let's move along with that. That's a great
Okay.
comment. And the last item is shared service agreements.
So that's mine as well. So you have a number of shared services with different entities, villages, the school district, other municipalities. And the state was offering grant money based on the number of IMAs or cooperative agreements that you actually had in place. So I think it's important to recognize the cooperation that's taken place. And you may actually be able to parlay it into some funding or recognition from the state. So, for example, we have a number of cooperative ventures that the village does with the school district. On the proposal tonight that we looked at for the proposed projects, there was an opportunity to share the sewer truck. We're looking at seeing if we can share that with Ardsley. So instead of spending 250,000, we might spend 125,000. And we have a number of things that we do with the school district as we speak, which includes crossing guards, and they allow us to use their space, and we do certain efforts on their behalf. So I reached out, and we're going to get together with the superintendent, and she's going to come forward with her finance person, and Jeff and I are going to go and have a meeting, and it's a get to know you session. And really, it's better to try to document these things, not only because of the the opportunity to get grant money that the state was offering, but you also have a baseline for if if you're providing A, B, and C, and then someone else has some other expectations, you can go back to an original agreement and you can reference that. It's a good focal point. And really, these municipalities and entities survive best if, the more cooperative they are. So
No, I think
that's really what we're working on.
that's a good point, and I'm glad you're going to meet with the school to see what's going on, so we can get a
So
handle
look
on
forward
that.
to that meeting. I think it's gonna be in the next week or two.
And outside of the school district, which other areas
Well,
can we think of?
like we proposed here with, I know there's a lot of informal back and forth, like if you're short this truck, they'll reach out and help and that kind of thing. We're not talking about that so much. We're talking about capital expenditures. So like we proposed in this proposal that you looked at today, sharing the sewer truck, for example, with the Village of Bardsley. Honestly, emergency services is going to be an opportunity to investigate more in the future, things like that. It's inevitable and it's a savings,
When George Latimer was voted into office in 2017, I know that there was some significant discussion about sharing services, and there were municipalities that they actually acted on this. So I'm curious to know of which other opportunities they are in so many different other areas that we could benefit from considering
Yeah,
this.
we're working on mitigation study as we speak. The county has taken that on and we're submitting data to them for floodwater mitigation. Like that, we share some computer services from the county. There's a lot of opportunities. So,
In the past, we have looked at DPW with Hastings, turned out not to be worthwhile. We looked at the police years and years ago with the county, I think that turned out. So, but it does seem maybe some DPW of sharing of trucks and that material and equipment that's very expensive is
Yeah.
something that's worthwhile, right?
When our sweeper was down, we borrowed Ardsley's sweeper.
Right.
Right now, Ardsley doesn't have a sewer truck, so they borrow our sewer truck.
Right.
So that's why we were looking at splitting the sewer truck.
so if we go in jointly with an Ardsley, spend $125, maybe we keep ours as a potential backup in the event of an emergency. So if they need it, we don't get caught short. It's reciprocity is the way that it's going to go.
Yeah, and I think the fire departments also, we don't have a certain type of ladder truck and like Irvington might, and we share it that way. But I think if we could formalize it so that we as a board would even know that we could say, oh yeah, we are sharing this much with Ardsley and this much with Irvington, I think it would be beneficial to all the communities to know. So I do think that is the way to go in the future.
And, last year when the emergencies arose due to the pandemic, the school went on a hybrid sort of staggered schedule in the interest of health and safety of the children. And it necessitated doubling and even tripling of the crossing guards. So, you can't get total reimbursement for all the crossing guards because that is statutorily your obligation as a village. But in the interest of reimbursement, and the school district was approached, in addition to the standard crossings, which have a finite list, and the police chief has sent it to me, say, I'm just going to throw out this and say there are 10. And in the lockdown, in the emergency, in the regulations, they added another 10 because you had to go back to the same place twice or 3 times. The additional coverage, which has to come through your police department by statute, could be reimbursed. The need and the necessity to have those extra shifts, if they cannot bring crossing guards in to man them, they must be manned by your police department. That's because they are actual peace officers. They are regulated by statute. So they can't just be a volunteer they can under certain circumstances, but in order to stop traffic, and that's what a crossing guard can do, has the authority under the statute to stop traffic for the crossing, they must be under the police department. So you have the ability when you, and if you want to enter into shared services with the school district, to get reimbursed for those scenarios and situations that arose last year by virtue of an emergency.
Well, that's also a good point, because I know in the beginning of this pandemic, and I think Jeff was involved as well, we met all the time with the other villages and we would order the PPEs in bulk and we would share them with Hastings, Irvington, Tarrytown. We'd split proportionately what the costs were. We were always buying that stuff and splitting it. So I think that was a good example of cooperation among the villages. And it was cheaper for us as the river towns to buy that many more items, and we could split it among ourselves. So that was working out well.
And you always have the ability to enter into IMAs, intermunicipal agreements with your town, for example.
Right.
Utilize the town services in a mutual way as well. So, you have actually give up your tax assessment that by statute then fell to the town. But there are other incidences where the statute doesn't say, if we give this up, someone else has to do it, but they are arrangements that you can make outside of the scope of statutes, like a DPW sharing of services, like even if it's just a finite portion of DPW services, it's available, it's an option, it's regulated, the statute provides the authority in the general municipal law.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that. So is there anything else that anyone would like to add or ask before I adjourn this workshop? Okay, hearing no further objections or questions, is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting into an executive session? Trustees Taylor, second. Trustee DeRozzi, all in favor? Passes 5-0. We are now adjourning into the executive session to address matters of personnel.
All right, and just for this, we'll mute the cameras and the microphones. I'll start a Zoom in the other room. So you're going to actually leave this meeting, the board members, to adjourn into executive session, and then you'll have to re-sign on because you'll need on the record an adjournment of the meeting itself. Okay.
Hi, Jan.
Hello.
Yeah, that's almost. Lori Lee, we really did.
Let's see.
Lori
if
Lee, we
the
really, Lori Lee, we
cameras
really
work.
need you at that meeting.
I gotta go home.
No, we rely.
I'm over
that's not right.
here.
We rely on your expertise.
Oh,
So I'm doing a motion to go to end the executive session.
Jen's gonna help us.
To return to, yeah, that was quick. You're gonna call for a motion and a second and vote to go back into the general. meeting.
You are gonna do it.
I am. I don't have
Well,
to.
just to
I'm gonna
return
tell
to the
you.
general.
Are you kidding
I'm
me?
gonna teach you.
Oh my
You don't
God.
have to close the executive session. You just do the other way around. Motion to go back into.
Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Is there a motion to go into the regular workshop session? Trustee DeRosa, second, trustee Casal. All in favor? That passes unanimously. We now are adjourning.
No, yeah.
I need a motion.
to
I need a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn the regular work session. Trustee Larry Taylor, second, trustee Patino. All in favor? That passes unanimously. The meeting is now adjourned.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
How'd we do with the time?
Good night, everybody. Thanks, Jan.
We'll meet you in-